The doctor's words were still ringing in my ears when Vivian's text arrived. "Mom, we need to talk. Come home now." But what she said when I walked through that door in Riverside Heights changed everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. And she had absolutely no idea that while she was throwing me out like garbage, I was secretly running a business empire worth $12 million. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Hammond had just delivered the news that would split my life into before and after. Stage 2 breast cancer. Aggressive treatment needed immediately. 6 months of chemotherapy, possible surgery, and a recovery period that could stretch well into the following year. I sat in that sterile office in downtown Millbrook, my hands trembling as I processed the magnitude of what lay ahead. The 40-minute drive back to Vivian's house felt like hours. My mind raced between medical appointments I'd need to schedule and the conversation I'd have to have with my 26-year-old daughter. Vivian had always been my rock, my fierce protector, the one person I could count on when life got complicated. When her father, David, left us when she was 12, she'd wrapped her arms around me and promised we'd face everything together. When I lost my teaching job 3 years ago due to budget cuts, she'd insisted I move in with her and her husband Preston in their beautiful colonial home. "Mom, you took care of me my whole life," she'd said back then, her eyes bright with determination. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." I'd been living in their guest room for 2.5 years, contributing what I could from my small freelance editing work, while secretly building something Vivian never knew existed. But that's a story for later. The house on Maple Creek Drive looked the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawn, Preston's BMW in the driveway, the decorative fall wreath Vivian had hung just last week. But when I walked through the front door, the atmosphere felt different. Heavy. Charged with an energy that made my stomach clench. Vivian was pacing in the living room, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her usually warm brown eyes cold and distant. Preston sat on the leather sofa, his laptop open, but his attention focused entirely on his wife. Neither of them looked up when I entered. "Sit down, Mom," Vivian said, her voice flat. Not, "How did the appointment go?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just a command. I lowered myself into the armchair across from them, my purse still clutched in my hands. "Honey, I need to tell you something important. The doctor—" "Stop." Vivian held up her hand. "Before you say anything, I need to tell you something. Preston and I have been talking, and we've made a decision." The room seemed to shrink around me. Preston cleared his throat, his pale blue eyes avoiding mine. "Elena, we've appreciated having you here, but we're ready to start the next chapter of our lives. We want to have children," Vivian continued, her words coming out in a rehearsed rush. "And we need the space. We need our privacy. We need to focus on our future as a family." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. "Vivian, I understand that, but I just came from the doctor and—" "Mom, stop trying to manipulate the situation." Her voice turned sharp, cutting. "This isn't about whatever drama you think you have going on. This is about Preston and me finally putting our marriage first." "Drama?" The word came out as a whisper. "Vivian, I have cancer." The silence that followed was deafening. Preston's fingers stopped moving on his keyboard. Vivian's pacing halted mid-step. But instead of the shock, concern, or compassion I expected, I watched my daughter's face harden. "Of course you do," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "How convenient. Right when we tell you we need you to move out, suddenly you have a medical emergency." The blood drained from my face. "Convenient? Vivian, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you've always been dramatic, Mom. Remember when I was 16 and wanted to spend the summer with Dad in Portland? Suddenly you had chest pains and needed to go to the emergency." "Save it!" She crossed her arms over her chest. "Even if it's real this time, it doesn't change anything. We've made our decision. You need to find somewhere else to live." Preston finally spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "Elena, we're not throwing you out on the street. We'll give you 30 days to find a place. That's more than generous. 30 days. to find a new home while facing the fight of my life, while preparing for chemotherapy that would leave me weak and sick, while dealing with surgery and recovery. "I can't believe this," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "Vivian, I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And the moment I get sick, really sick, you want me gone?" "Don't you dare try to guilt-trip me," Vivian snapped. "You think just because you're my mother, I owe you everything? You think I should put my entire life on hold because you might be sick? Preston and I have been planning our family for years, and we're not delaying it anymore because you need attention." The woman standing in front of me was a stranger. This wasn't the daughter who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. This wasn't the girl who'd cried in my arms when her high school boyfriend broke her heart. This wasn't the young woman who'd called me her best friend at her wedding. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Vivian, I don't have anywhere." "Figure it out," she said coldly. "You're a grown woman. You've been freeloading here long enough. Maybe this will finally motivate you to get your life together." Freeloading. The word hit me like a slap. If only she knew that while she thought I was struggling to make ends meet with my little editing jobs, I was actually running Thornfield Digital Solutions, a consulting company I'd built from my laptop in her guest room. If only she knew about the clients paying me 6 figures for marketing strategies. If only she knew about the investment portfolio that had grown from my business profits. But I'd kept it all secret, not wanting to complicate our relationship with money. I'd wanted her to care for me because she loved me, not because I was financially valuable. I'd wanted to know that our bond was real. Now I had my answer. 30 days, Preston repeated, closing his laptop with a decisive click. "We'll have the guest room cleared out by December 1st. As I sat there, cancer diagnosis still fresh in my mind, watching my daughter dismiss my pain like it was an inconvenience, something cold and final settled in my chest. I'd spent years putting Vivian first, keeping my success hidden to preserve what I thought was genuine love between us. But love, I was beginning to realize, was supposed to flow both ways. And in 30 days, when I walked out of this house, Vivian was going to learn exactly what she'd thrown away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That night, lying in what would soon be my former bedroom, I stared at the ceiling as Vivian's words echoed in my mind. But at 2:47 a.m., as I listened to her and Preston laughing in their bedroom about finally getting their space back, something inside me shifted, and a voice I'd buried for years whispered something that changed everything. "Elena, what if this isn't about you being sick? What if this is about who your daughter really is?" I'd spent the evening in a fog of disbelief, mechanically going through the motions of making dinner, while Vivian and Preston acted like nothing had happened. They discussed weekend plans, Preston's upcoming promotion, and their timeline for trying for babies, as if I wasn't sitting 3 feet away with cancer cells multiplying in my body. During dinner, I'd tried one more time. "Vivian, honey, I know this is overwhelming, but Dr. Hammond said the treatment is very aggressive. I'll need help getting to appointments and the side effects." "Mom, please," she'd interrupted, not even looking up from her salmon. "We've already discussed this. You're a survivor. You always figure things out." Preston had nodded approvingly. "Elena, you raised Vivian as a single mother. You're clearly resourceful. This is just another challenge for you to overcome." Their casual dismissal of my diagnosis felt surreal, like I was watching actors in a play. "People like you." As if I was some kind of burden she'd inherited, rather than the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for her private school education. Now, lying in the dark, I could hear them through the thin walls. Their conversation drifted clearly into my room. "I'm so proud of you for standing firm," Preston was saying. "Your mom has been manipulating you with guilt for years." "I know," Vivian replied. "She's always been dramatic. Remember how she claimed she couldn't afford my college textbooks, then somehow managed to buy them anyway? She just wanted me to feel guilty about the expense." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Those textbooks had cost me 2 months of grocery money. I'd eaten nothing but ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches so she wouldn't have to take out additional loans. And now, this convenient cancer diagnosis right when we want our space, Preston continued. "The timing is suspicious." "Exactly. Even if she is sick, she's an adult. It's not my responsibility to put my life on hold because she made poor financial decisions and doesn't have insurance or savings. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Poor financial decisions? No savings? If they only knew that my poor financial decisions had generated enough wealth to buy their house 3 times over. You deserve to start our family without her hovering around, playing the victim, Preston said. We've given her free housing for years. That's more than most daughters would do. I just want to be free to live my own life, Vivian sighed. I'm tired of being responsible for her emotions, her problems, her drama. When she moves out, it'll be the first time in my life I won't have to worry about making her happy. The first time in her life. As if caring for me had been some unbearable burden she'd carried since childhood. I slipped out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The voice in my head grew stronger, clearer. Elena, listen to what they're saying. Really listen. Your daughter isn't worried about your health. She's annoyed by the inconvenience of your cancer. She's not concerned about your future. She's excited about getting rid of you. I closed my eyes, letting the truth wash over me. For years, I'd convinced myself that Vivian's occasional coldness was just stress, that her dismissive comments were just her being overwhelmed. I'd made excuses for every slight, every moment when she'd prioritized others over me. When she'd missed my 50th birthday because Preston's work party was the same night, I'd told myself her career was important. When she'd forgotten to call me for 3 weeks after I'd had surgery to remove a suspicious mole, I'd convinced myself she was just busy with her new marriage. When she'd rolled her eyes at my excitement about a freelance editing client, I'd assumed she was having a bad day. But tonight, hearing her laugh about finally being free of me while I faced the scariest diagnosis of my life, I couldn't deny it anymore. The voice continued, relentless but gentle. She doesn't love you the way you love her. She never has. You've been pouring your heart into someone who sees you as an obligation. I thought about all the times I'd prioritized her needs over my own. The business opportunities I'd turned down because they would have required travel, leaving her alone. The relationships I'd avoided because she'd made it clear she didn't want to share me with anyone else. The dreams I'd postponed because being her mother had felt like the most important job in the world. And through it all, I'd been building Thornfield Digital Solutions in secret, telling myself I was protecting our relationship by keeping my success hidden. I'd thought that if she knew I was wealthy, it might change things between us, make our connection feel less authentic. What a joke. Our connection was already a lie. Elena, the voice whispered, what if this cancer diagnosis isn't the worst thing that's happened to you? What if it's the thing that finally showed you who your daughter really is? I walked to my laptop and opened it quietly. The glow of the screen illuminated my face as I logged into my business accounts. Thornfield Digital Solutions had 3 new contract proposals waiting, including one from a Fortune 500 company that would pay more in 6 months than Preston made in 2 years. My investment portfolio showed gains that would make Vivian's jaw drop. My savings account held more money than she'd probably see in a decade. The vacation rental properties I owned in 3... What if, the voice continued, you stopped hiding who you really are? What if you let her discover what she's actually throwing away? For the first time since Dr. Hammond had delivered my diagnosis, I smiled. Not a sad, resigned smile, but something sharp and determined. Vivian wanted me out in 30 days? Fine, but she was about to learn that the woman she was discarding wasn't the helpless, financially struggling mother she thought she knew. I was Elena Rodriguez, founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting empire. And if my daughter wanted to throw me away like garbage the moment I got sick, she was about to discover exactly what that decision would cost her. I opened a new browser window and began searching for luxury apartments in the most exclusive part of Millbrook. If Vivian wanted me gone, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. But I'd do it in style. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 26 years of being Vivian's mother. I put myself first. While she and Preston slept in, blissfully unaware of the storm they'd unleashed, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything, starting with the luxury real estate agent who specialized in Millbrook's most exclusive properties. Mrs. Rodriguez, came the smooth voice of Catherine Whitmore from Prestige Properties. I have the perfect penthouse for you. Corner unit at the Meridian Tower, floor-to-ceiling windows, private elevator access. It's been on the market for 6 months because, frankly, most people can't afford the asking price. What's the asking price? I asked, stepping out onto the back patio where Vivian and Preston couldn't overhear. 4.2 million, but the seller is motivated. I could probably get it for 3.8. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. Full asking price. Cash. The silence on the other end was telling. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you certain? This is a significant. I'm certain. How quickly can we close? With cash? 2 weeks, maybe sooner, if we expedite the inspections. Perfect. I'd be out of Vivian's house in half the time she'd given me. And I'd be moving into a penthouse that cost more than she and Preston would earn in their combined lifetimes. My second call was to Dr. Miranda Blackstone, the top oncologist in the tri-state area. Not the doctor my insurance would cover, but the doctor who had successfully treated 3 Hollywood actresses and a tech billionaire's wife. The doctor whose waiting list was supposedly 6 months long. Dr. Blackstone's office, came the receptionist's voice. This is Elena Rodriguez. I need to schedule a consultation for stage 2 breast cancer treatment. I understand Dr. Blackstone's schedule is quite full, but I'm prepared to pay privately for immediate care. I'm sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez, but Dr. Blackstone isn't accepting new patients until... Tell Dr. Blackstone that I'm the CEO of Thornfield Digital Solutions, and I'm prepared to make a substantial donation to her research foundation in addition to paying for treatment. I need an appointment this week. 20 minutes later, they called back. I had an appointment for Thursday afternoon. My third call was to James Morrison, my business manager, and the only person who knew the true extent of my wealth. Elena, how did the doctor's appointment go yesterday? I'd texted him about my diagnosis the night before, but I hadn't told him about Vivian's reaction. The cancer is treatable, but that's not why I'm calling. I need you to arrange something for me. Whatever you need. I want you to purchase the most expensive, most beautiful flower arrangement you can find. I gave him Vivian's address, my current address, and could practically hear his confusion through the phone. Elena, are you feeling all right? This is pretty elaborate for a get-well arrangement. Trust me, James, and make sure the delivery arrives around noon when my daughter will be home. Your daughter? I thought you were keeping your business private from your family. I was, but circumstances have changed. After hanging up, I made myself coffee and sat in the kitchen, watching the morning light stream through windows I'd looked through for over 2 years. This house had felt like home for so long, but now it felt like a stage set where I'd been playing a role that no longer fit. Around 9:30, Vivian stumbled downstairs in her silk pajamas, hair messy from sleep. She moved through the kitchen like I wasn't there, making her protein smoothie and checking her phone. Good morning, I said pleasantly. She glanced up, looking surprised that I was speaking to her normally. Oh, morning. I wanted to let you know that I've made some arrangements. I'll be out of your hair much sooner than 30 days. She paused, smoothie halfway to her lips. Really, where are you going? I've found a place. I should be moved out within 2 weeks. That's good. I mean, that's great that you found something so quickly. She looked almost disappointed, like she'd been looking forward to having 30 days of me feeling desperate and grateful for their generosity. Where is it? She asked, trying to sound casual. I hope it's somewhere safe. You know, with your situation, you'll want to be close to good medical facilities. The fake concern in her voice made my stomach turn. It's in Millbrook, very close to excellent medical care. That's good. Millbrook's gotten expensive lately, but I'm sure you found something affordable. Affordable. As if I was some elderly woman searching for a subsidized senior apartment. Yes, I said simply. It suits my needs perfectly. Preston appeared a few minutes later, dressed for work in one of his expensive suits. He nodded at me politely, the way you'd acknowledge a house guest who'd overstayed their welcome. Vivian told me you found a place, he said, pouring coffee into his travel mug. That's wonderful. Whereabouts? The Meridian Tower. Preston's hand froze on the coffee pot. The Meridian? Are you sure? That's a pretty upscale building. I'm sure. Vivian looked between us, confused. What's the Meridian? It's the luxury high-rise downtown. Preston explained slowly. The one with the penthouse that was featured in Architectural Digest last year. Mom, are you certain about this? Those units started around $2 million, I smiled sweetly. I'm very certain. They exchanged glances, and I could see the wheels turning. Vivian's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. Mom, how exactly are you affording the Meridian Tower? Those aren't rental units. I'm purchasing. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Preston's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Vivian's smoothie glass slipped slightly in her hand. Purchasing? Vivian's voice came out as a squeak. Mom, what are you talking about? You do freelance editing. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You shop at discount stores. I do drive a Honda, I agreed. And I do shop carefully. I've never been one to flaunt wealth. The delivery required 2 men to carry it in. The arrangement was stunning. A massive display of white orchids, pink peonies, and premium roses arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than Preston's monthly car payment. The entire creation stood nearly 4 feet tall and filled the entryway with the most expensive floral fragrance money could buy. Vivian and Preston stood in the hallway, mouths literally hanging open, as the delivery men positioned the arrangement in the living room. Ma'am, we'll need you to sign here, one of them said, handing me an electronic pad. And this is from Mr. Morrison. He wanted to make sure you got the card personally. I opened the small envelope and read aloud. To Elena, for her courage and strength during this difficult time. With love and admiration from your friends at Thornfield Digital Solutions. After the delivery men left, silence filled the house. Vivian walked slowly around the arrangement like it might explode. Mom, she said carefully, who is Thornfield Digital Solutions? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Yesterday, she'd been ready to throw me out on the street with cancer. Today, seeing evidence of money, she was suddenly interested in my well-being. They're business associates, I said simply. What kind of business associates send $4,000 flower arrangements? Preston demanded. The kind who value long-term relationships. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Mom, what exactly is Thornfield Digital Solutions? I could have told her then. I could have explained that I was the founder and CEO, that I'd built a multi-million-dollar consulting empire from their guest room, that I was worth more than they could imagine. I could have watched their faces change, from confusion to shock, to the inevitable shame of realizing they'd just thrown out a woman who could have bought and sold them without thinking twice. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and said, I should start packing. 2 weeks will go by quickly. As I walked upstairs, I heard Vivian whisper to Preston, Google Thornfield Digital Solutions, right now. The first resistance wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, controlled, and devastatingly effective. I'd simply stopped pretending to be the woman they thought I was. Poor, dependent, grateful for their charity. Now they were starting to wonder who I actually was. And that was just the beginning. Makiz! I was upstairs carefully packing my grandmother's china when I heard the shouting start. Vivian's voice, shrill and demanding, cut through the house like a siren, as Preston's deeper tones tried unsuccessfully to calm her down. What I didn't expect was for her to come storming up the stairs and burst into my room without knocking, her face flushed red with a mixture of panic and rage. We need to talk. Right now. She slammed the door behind her and positioned herself between me and the exit like a prison guard. I Googled your little company, Mom. Thornfield Digital Solutions doesn't exist. I continued wrapping a delicate teacup in tissue paper, not looking up. Did you try the correct spelling? Don't play games with me, her voice cracked with hysteria. I searched every possible variation. There's no company by that name. No website, no LinkedIn page, no business registration, nothing. Of course she wouldn't find anything. James had built Thornfield Digital Solutions as a completely private entity, operating through shell companies and encrypted networks to protect my anonymity. We'd specifically designed it to be invisible to casual internet searches. Perhaps you didn't look hard enough, I said mildly, placing the wrapped cup in the moving box. Vivian's hands were shaking now. Mom, I'm not stupid. That flower arrangement cost thousands of dollars. The Meridian Tower penthouse costs millions. You're talking about seeing the most expensive doctor in the state. Where is this money coming from? I finally looked up at her, noting how her perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. You seem upset, sweetheart. Are you feeling all right? Don't you dare patronize me. She grabbed the tissue paper from my hands and threw it across the room. Yesterday, you were a broke freelance editor living in our guest room. Today, you're buying penthouses and getting The audacity was breathtaking. 24 hours ago, they dismissed my cancer as attention-seeking drama. Now they were using it to explain away behavior they couldn't understand. I appreciate your concern, I said, returning to my packing. But I assure you, my mental health is excellent. Vivian started pacing, her movements sharp and agitated. This is insane. People don't just magically have millions of dollars. Did you win the lottery? Did someone die and leave you an inheritance? Did you take out some kind of massive loan using our house as collateral? The last question made Preston go pale. Elena, please tell me you didn't forge our signatures on anything. If you're in some kind of financial trouble and thought you could use our property— Preston, I interrupted gently, I would never do anything to jeopardize your home. You have my word on that. But Vivian wasn't listening to reassurances. She was spiraling deeper into panic, and I could see the exact moment when her desperation turned into something uglier. Fine. If you won't tell us the truth, I'll find it myself. She lunged toward my laptop, which was sitting open on the bed. I moved faster than I had in years, slamming the laptop shut just as her fingers reached for it. That's private property, Vivian. Private? Private? Her voice rose to a near shriek. Nothing is private when you're living under our roof. Nothing is private when you're clearly lying to us about everything. Preston stepped forward, his usually calm demeanor cracking. Elena, if you're involved in something illegal, we need to know. We can't have criminal activity happening in our home. Criminal activity. The assumption that the only way I could have money was through illegal means revealed everything I needed to know about how they'd always seen me. You think I'm a criminal? I said quietly. I think you're lying, Vivian shot back. And I think whatever scheme you're running is going to blow up in your face and take us down with it. I won't let you destroy our lives because you've lost your mind. She reached for my laptop again, and this time I didn't stop her. I wanted to see what she'd do when she couldn't break the encryption that protected my business files. Vivian opened the laptop and immediately hit a password screen. What's the password? I'm not giving you my password. Mom, I'm serious. If you don't unlock this right now, I'm calling the police and reporting you for fraud. The threat hung in the air like a knife. My own daughter was threatening to have me arrested because I wouldn't give her access to my private information. On what grounds would you report me for fraud? I asked calmly. Identity theft, forgery, whatever this is. She gestured wildly at the room. Normal people don't go from broke to millionaire overnight. Normal people don't get mysterious flower deliveries from companies that don't exist. Normal people don't buy penthouse apartments when they can't even afford their own place to live. Preston nodded enthusiastically. Elena, we've been supporting you for years. If you suddenly have money, where was it when you needed our help? Why were you pretending to be financially struggling if you could afford luxury living all along? The question hit like a physical blow, not because it was cruel, but because it was so perfectly wrong. I hadn't been pretending to struggle. I'd been choosing to live modestly to preserve what I thought was a loving family relationship. I'd hidden my success to avoid changing the dynamic between us, to make sure Vivian's affection was genuine rather than motivated by money. What a spectacular miscalculation that had been. Maybe, I said carefully. I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing to offer you. Vivian's face went white, then red, then purple. Are you saying this has all been some kind of test? That you've been lying to us for years just to manipulate us? I'm saying that I've learned a great deal about both of you in the past 24 hours. You're sick, Vivian screamed. You're actually sick in the head. What kind of person tests their own family? What kind of mother plays mind games with her daughter? She was working herself into a full meltdown now, her voice becoming increasingly shrill and desperate. Preston, do you see this? Do you see what we've been living with? She's been sitting in our guest room, pretending to be poor, secretly.
We've been worried about you, Vivian continued, her voice cracking. We've been tiptoeing around your feelings, trying to be gentle about asking you to move out, and the whole time you've been playing some twisted game. The irony was staggering. They'd spent yesterday callously dismissing my cancer diagnosis, and today they were claiming they'd been gentle and worried about me. I need to see bank statements, Vivian demanded suddenly. I need to see proof of where this money is coming from, or I'm calling the authorities. You're not entitled to my financial information. I am when you're living in my house. I am when you're clearly running some kind of scam that could land us all in legal trouble. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. Fine. If you won't be honest with us, I'll let the police figure it out. I watched her thumb move across the screen and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. This was who my daughter really was. Not just someone who would throw me out when I got sick, but someone who would try to have me arrested when she discovered I wasn't the helpless victim she thought she knew. Hello, police? Vivian's voice was artificially sweet now, playing the role of concerned citizen. I'd like to report suspicious financial activity in my home. My mother is suddenly claiming to have millions of dollars with no legitimate source of income, and I'm concerned she may be involved in money laundering or fraud. She was actually doing it. My daughter was actually calling the police on me because I dared to have money she didn't know about. As I listened to her give our address to the dispatcher, I realized that the awakening I'd experienced the night before had been just the beginning. This was the moment when Vivian showed me exactly how far she was willing to go to maintain control over the narrative of who I was supposed to be. The police would come, I would calmly explain that all my finances were completely legal and documented, and they would leave. But Vivian would have crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Claim Malfroze. She'd just tried to have her own mother arrested for the crime of being successful. When she hung up the phone, her face was flushed with a mixture of satisfaction and terror. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Maybe now you'll start telling the truth. I smiled at her, and for the first time in our relationship I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Real fear, because she was finally beginning to understand that she had no idea who she was dealing with. I'll be happy to speak with them, I said calmly. I think they'll find our conversation very enlightening. As we waited for the police to arrive, I found myself remembering the first time Vivian had tried to control my life through manufactured crisis. She was 15, and I'd been offered a promotion that would have required me to travel 2 weeks per month. The salary increase would have meant private school, college funds, a better future for both of us. But the night before I was supposed to give my answer, Vivian had called me at work, sobbing hysterically. Mom, you have to come home right now, she'd cried. I think someone broke into the house. I heard noises and I'm scared. I'd left the meeting, raced home, and found her sitting calmly in the living room watching television. When I'd asked about the break-in, she'd shrugged and said she must have been mistaken. The next morning, I'd turned down the promotion, telling my boss that my daughter needed stability at home. It wasn't until years later that I'd realized the timing had been too convenient, her recovery too quick. Now, sitting in her guest room while she called the police on me, I could see the pattern that had been invisible for so long. Every time I'd tried to prioritize my own growth or happiness, Vivian had created a crisis that required my immediate attention and sacrifice. When I'd started dating Robert Mitchell 3 years after her father left, Vivian had suddenly developed mysterious panic attacks that only occurred when he was around. When I had been accepted into a graduate program that would have advanced my teaching career, she'd been suspended from school for fighting and needed constant supervision. When I'd saved enough money for a small vacation, my first in a decade, she'd broken her wrist in what she claimed was an accident, but had clearly been a reckless stunt, designed to make me feel guilty for wanting time away. The teaching position I'd lost wasn't really due to budget cuts either. I was starting to remember the parent complaints that had missed. How convenient that I'd lost my job just when she needed me most. Preston knocked on the bedroom door, interrupting my thoughts. "Elena, the police are here." I walked downstairs to find two officers in the living room, their presence making the space feel smaller and more tense. Officer Martinez, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, and Officer Chen, a younger man who kept glancing at the expensive flower arrangement with poorly concealed curiosity. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Officer Martinez asked. "We received a call about some concerns regarding suspicious financial activity." Vivian immediately launched into her prepared speech. "Officers, my mother has been living with us for over 2 years. Yesterday, she was a struggling freelance editor with no money. Today, she's claiming to have bought a penthouse and is receiving expensive gifts from a company that doesn't exist. We're worried she might be involved in something illegal or that someone is targeting her for fraud." Officer Chen pulled out his notepad. "Mrs. Rodriguez, can you explain the source of these funds?" "Certainly." I retrieved my laptop and opened it calmly. "I'll need to access my secure business files." I entered my password, ignoring Vivian's sharp intake of breath as the screen unlocked. Within moments, I had accessed the Thornfield Digital Solutions client portal, financial records, and business registration documents. "I'm the founder and CEO of Thornfield Digital Solutions," I explained, turning the screen so both officers could see. "We're a private consulting firm specializing in digital marketing strategy for high-net-worth clients. The company operates through private networks, which is why it doesn't appear in standard internet searches." Officer Martinez leaned forward, examining the documents. "These look legitimate. How long have you been operating this business?" 7 years. I started it while teaching, initially as a side project. After I lost my teaching position, I focused on it full-time, and it grew substantially. Officer Chen looked confused. "If you've been successful for years, why have you been living in your daughter's guest room?" I glanced at Vivian, whose face had gone completely white. "I chose to live modestly and contribute to household expenses while maintaining my business privately. I wanted to ensure that my family relationships were based on genuine affection rather than financial benefit." The officers exchanged glances. Officer Martinez spoke carefully. "Mrs. Rodriguez, everything you've shown us appears to be completely legal and legitimate. Your business registration is valid, your financial records are extensive and well documented." "But that's impossible," Vivian burst out. "She's been eating our food, using our utilities, acting like she couldn't afford her own place." "I paid for groceries," I said quietly. "I contributed to utilities. I bought household supplies and maintained the garden. I simply didn't disclose the full extent of my financial capabilities." Officer Chen was scrolling through my client testimonials on the laptop screen. "Mrs. Rodriguez, it says here you've worked with some major corporations. Technova Industries, Meridian Financial Group, Blackstone Marketing. Yes, those are some of our larger clients." Preston had been silent, but now he spoke up, his voice strained. "Elena, Technova Industries is worth billions. Meridian Financial is one of the biggest investment firms in the country." Officer Martinez looked at Vivian with something approaching disapproval. "Ma'am, are you telling us you called police because your mother has a successful business?" "No, I called because she was lying about it. Because she's been pretending to be poor while secretly being rich. That's fraud, isn't it?" "No, ma'am, that's not fraud. Fraud involves deceiving people to obtain money or property illegally. From what we can see, your mother earned her money legitimately and simply chose not to discuss her business with you." I could see Vivian's mind racing, trying to find some angle. As the officers prepared to leave, Officer Martinez turned back to me. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I hope your treatment goes well. Cancer is a serious battle, and it's good that you have the resources to access excellent care." After they left, the house fell into a silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Vivian stood in the middle of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like she'd been slapped. Preston sat heavily on the sofa, his head in his hands. "How long?" Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. "How long have you been lying to us?" "I've never lied to you. I simply haven't shared every detail of my professional life." "Every detail?" Her voice was rising again. "You've been a millionaire living in our guest room. You've been successful and wealthy while I worried about your future, while I felt guilty about asking you to move out." The irony was staggering. She was angry that her guilt had been unnecessary, not that she'd felt no compassion for someone she believed was struggling. Preston looked up, his face filled with a mixture of confusion and what looked almost like betrayal. "Elena, do you have any idea how this makes us feel? We've been treating you like charity?" I suggested gently. "We were trying to help you," Vivian exploded. "We thought you needed us." And there it was. The truth she'd accidentally revealed. They hadn't been housing me out of love or family obligation. They'd been housing me because they thought I needed them, because my dependence made them feel important and generous. "So you're upset because you discovered your charity case doesn't actually need charity?" Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not what I meant." "Isn't it? You're not angry that I have money, Vivian. You're angry that I had money and still let you feel superior to me." Preston stood up abruptly. "This is unbelievable. Elena, we've been walking on eggshells around your feelings, worried about your finances, and the whole time you've been sitting there laughing at us." "I've never laughed at you. I've appreciated your hospitality and tried to be a good house guest." "House guest?" Vivian's voice cracked. "You're my mother. You were supposed to need me." The words hung in the air like a confession. She was supposed to need them. My dependence had been part of the arrangement, part of what made her feel good about herself. "And now that you know I don't need you," I said quietly, "how does that change things?" Vivian's face crumpled, but instead of sadness, what I saw was rage. Pure, undiluted rage at having her worldview shattered, at discovering that the person she'd been condescending to was actually more successful than she could ever dream of being. "You manipulated us," she whispered. "You played mind games with our emotions." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the loving child I'd raised, but a stranger who was angry that her victim had turned out to be more powerful than her rescuer. The pattern was complete now. Every crisis, every emergency, every moment when she'd needed me to drop everything and rush to her side, it had all been about control. About keeping me small, keeping me available, keeping me grateful for whatever scraps of affection she was willing to offer. But the biggest revelation wasn't about her patterns of manipulation, keeping clients. It was about mine. I'd enabled every bit of it by pretending to be less than I was, by hiding my success, by making myself small enough to fit into the role she needed me to play. That was about to change. The next morning I woke to find Vivian sitting on the edge of my bed, tears streaming down her face in perfectly timed rivulets.
"Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking with practiced precision, "I couldn't sleep all night. I kept looking at these pictures and remembering how close we used to be." I sat up slowly, noting how she'd carefully arranged herself for maximum emotional impact. The album was open to a photo of us at her 8th birthday party, both of us covered in chocolate cake and laughing. It was a good choice, one of our happiest memories together. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday," she continued, dabbing at her eyes with the tissue. "And I think I understand now. You've been protecting us, haven't you? Keeping your success secret, because you were afraid it might change our relationship?" The sudden shift from rage to understanding was so smooth it would have been impressive if it weren't so calculating. This was Vivian deploying her most powerful weapon, the version of herself that I'd fallen for countless times before. "You didn't want us to love you for your money," she went on, her voice soft and vulnerable. "You wanted to know that our love was real." "Oh, Mom, that's so beautiful and so sad." Preston appeared in the doorway, holding a tray with coffee and what looked like homemade blueberry muffins, my favorite. His face wore an expression of gentle concern, mixed with sheepish embarrassment. "Elena, we brought you breakfast," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. We've been talking all night, and we realize we handled yesterday all wrong." Vivian scooted closer to me on the bed, the photo album still clutched against her chest. "Mom, I was so shocked yesterday that I said terrible things. But Preston helped me see the truth. You've been testing us, haven't you? All these years, you've been seeing if we'd love you even when we thought you had nothing to offer." She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. "And we failed the test so badly. The moment I thought you might be sick and need help, I pushed you away. What kind of daughter does that make me?" The performance was flawless. The tears, the vulnerability, the self-recrimination that was designed to make me rush to comfort her. She'd identified exactly what she thought I wanted to hear, that my secrecy had been about ensuring authentic love, and that she was devastated by her failure to provide it. "Preston and I talked about having children," she continued, "and it made me realize something. If I was facing cancer, if I was scared and alone, I would want my mother by my side. I would want her strength and wisdom and love. And instead of giving you that, I tried to throw you out." Preston nodded solemnly. "Elena, we were overwhelmed by the revelation about your business, but that's no excuse. When someone you love is facing a serious illness, you support them. Period." Vivian lifted the photo album, pointing to a picture of me braiding her hair for a school dance. "Look at this, Mom. Look at how much you loved me. Look at how you always put me first. And the first time you needed me to put you first, I failed completely." The manipulation was so sophisticated that I could almost admire its artistry. She'd taken my real concern, whether their love was genuine, and twisted it into a narrative where her cruelty became a test she'd failed, making her the victim of her own bad behavior. "I want to make it right," she said, gripping my hand tighter. "I want you to stay here during your treatment. I want to take care of you the way you took care of me. Please, Mom, please don't move out. Let me prove that I can be the daughter you deserve." Preston stepped forward, his expression earnest. "Elena, we've already started planning. Vivian cleared her schedule to drive you to appointments. We've researched the best nutrition plans for cancer patients. We want to be your support system. And the baby thing," Vivian added quickly, "we can wait on that. Your health is more important than our timeline. We were being selfish and short-sighted." She opened the album to another picture, one of me holding her as a newborn, gazing down at her with absolute adoration. "You gave me everything when I was helpless and dependent. Now I want to give you everything while you fight this battle." The tears were flowing more freely now, and she let them fall onto the photo. "I love you, Mom. Not because of your business or your money, but because you're my mother. Because you—" Vivian leaned her head against my shoulder, just like she used to do when she was small and seeking comfort. "I was so scared yesterday, Mom. Scared that you were keeping secrets. Scared that I didn't really know you. But now I understand that the only secret you kept was how successful you are. Everything else, your love, your sacrifice, your devotion to our family, that was all real." She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red and puffy, but somehow more beautiful for their vulnerability. "Can you forgive me? Can you give me the chance to be the daughter I should have been all along?" The plea hung in the air between us, heavy with emotion and expectation. This was the moment where, historically, I would have melted, where I would have gathered her in my arms and assured her that of course I forgave her, that of course we could start over, that love meant never having to face consequences for hurting the people who cared about you. Preston pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. "We've already started researching. Look, we found support groups for families dealing with cancer. We found meal delivery services that specialize in nutrition for chemotherapy patients. We've created a calendar where we can coordinate your appointments and make sure someone is always available to drive you." Vivian nodded eagerly. "And Mom, we want to help with your business too. Preston has an MBA. He could assist with financial planning or operations. I have a communications degree. I could help with marketing or client relations. We could be a real family business." Now they wanted to be part of my success. Now that they knew it existed, they wanted access to it. "We could even move to a bigger house," Vivian continued, her excitement building. "Something with a proper office space for you. Maybe a mother-in-law suite so you'd have privacy but still be close. We could create the perfect environment for your recovery and your business growth. Preston was nodding enthusiastically. Elena, with your business connections and our support, you could probably expand even further. We could be real partners in this. Partners. The word made my stomach turn. Yesterday, I was a burden they couldn't wait to discard. Today, now that they knew about my wealth, they wanted to be partners. Vivian squeezed my hand again, her grip almost desperate. Please, Mom, please don't let yesterday be the end of our relationship. I know I hurt you, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Let me take care of you. Let me prove that I'm worthy of being your daughter. The performance was reaching its crescendo. The tears, the promises, the perfectly crafted combination of guilt and hope designed to make me believe that this version of Vivian was the real one, that yesterday had been an aberration rather than a revelation. But as I looked at her tear-stained face, at Preston's earnest expression, at the carefully arranged breakfast tray and the strategically chosen photo album, all I could think about was the voice that had whispered to me 2 nights ago. The voice that had warned me about exactly this moment. Elena, it whispered again. She's not afraid of losing you. She's afraid of losing access to what you can provide. I studied my daughter's face, noting the calculation behind the tears, the way her grip on my hand tightened whenever she sensed my attention wavering. This wasn't remorse, it was recruitment. This wasn't love, it was a hostile takeover disguised as reconciliation. She wanted back in, not because she'd realized she loved me, but because she'd realized she needed me. Vivian, I said softly, you've given this a lot of thought. I have, Mom, all night. Preston and I barely slept because we were so focused on figuring out how to make this right. I nodded slowly, watching hope bloom in her eyes. And you really want to take care of me during my treatment? More than anything, I want to be the daughter you can count on. The daughter who supports me no matter what? Yes, absolutely yes. I smiled at her, and for a moment her face lit up with relief and triumph. Then I gently extracted my hand from hers and stood up.
Mom, what do you mean? She asked, her voice still soft but with an edge creeping in. We just poured our hearts out to you. We're offering to take care of you, to be a real family during the hardest time of your life. I walked to the window and looked out at the manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the perfect suburban facade that had hidden so much dysfunction. Vivian, 2 days ago I told you I had cancer, and you accused me of lying for attention. Yesterday, when you discovered I had money, you called the police on me. Today, now that you know I'm wealthy, you want to be my caregiver and business partner. Preston stood up from the bed, his face flushing. Elena, that's not fair. People can change their minds when they have time to process difficult information. Change their minds, yes, but completely reverse their fundamental character? That's a different matter entirely. Vivian's carefully constructed vulnerability was beginning to crack. Mom, I made mistakes. I was scared and confused. But I'm trying to make it right. Are you? Or are you trying to regain access to something you realized you'd lost? The question hung in the air like smoke. Vivian's mouth opened and closed, her prepared responses suddenly seeming inadequate. I turned back to face them both. Let me ask you something, Vivian. If I hadn't revealed my financial situation, if I really was just a struggling freelance editor with cancer, would you still be offering to take care of me? Of course I would. Would you? Because 48 hours ago, when you thought I was exactly that person, you told me to figure out my own housing situation and suggested I apply for government assistance. Preston stepped forward, his businessman instincts kicking in. Elena, you're being unfair. The financial revelation changes the entire dynamic. It means we don't have to worry about the burden of supporting you financially during treatment. Burden. I repeated the word slowly. So your willingness to help me is contingent on whether I cost you money. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Preston, yesterday you questioned whether my cancer was real. Today you're researching nutrition plans for chemotherapy patients. The only thing that changed between yesterday and today was your knowledge of my bank account." Vivian was starting to look desperate now, her perfectly applied makeup beginning to smudge as real tears mixed with her calculated ones. "Mom, you're twisting everything we're saying. We love you. We want to help you. You want to help yourselves to the opportunities my success represents." The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian actually stepped backward, her hand flying to her chest as if I'd struck her. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "I'm your daughter. I brought you breakfast. I apologized. I offered to postpone having children to take care of you. You offered to postpone having children because you realized I might be more valuable to your future than you initially calculated." Preston's face was reddening with indignation. "Elena, this is incredibly cynical. We're trying to rebuild our relationship, and you're treating us like we're con artists. Are you rebuilding our relationship, or are you trying to salvage your access to my resources?" I walked to my suitcase and continued packing. Each item I folded a small act of liberation. "Let me tell you what I've learned about boundaries, Preston. Real love doesn't require you to prove your worthiness by being useful. Real love doesn't fluctuate based on your financial situation. Real love doesn't disappear when you're sick and reappear when you're wealthy." Vivian was crying in earnest now, but there was anger mixed with the tears. "You're punishing us for being human. You're holding our mistakes against us forever." "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself." "From what? From people who love you?" I stopped packing and looked directly at her. "Vivian, can you honestly tell me that if I were broke and sick, you'd be sitting on my bed right now with photo albums and breakfast trays?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of truth she couldn't bring. "They do. And what I've learned from this mistake is that I need to stop making myself smaller to accommodate other people's comfort levels." I closed the suitcase with a decisive click. "For years I hid my success because I was afraid it would change how you treated me. I was right to be afraid, but I was wrong about which direction the change would go." Vivian stood up abruptly, the photo album falling to the floor with a dull thud. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away from your family because we're not perfect?" "I'm walking away from people who see me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" "Vivian, in the past hour you've offered to be my caregiver, my business partner, and my housemate. You've suggested we buy a bigger house together and create a, quote, family business. But you haven't once asked me how I'm feeling about my diagnosis, what my treatment options are, or whether I'm scared." The observation hit its mark. Vivian's face went pale as she realized I was right. "You've been so focused on positioning yourself to benefit from my situation that you forgot to actually care about my situation." Preston was shaking his head vigorously. "Elena, you're being unreasonable. We're offering you everything: support, companionship, assistance with your business. You're offering me everything except what I actually need." "Which is what?" "The knowledge that you would care about me even if I had nothing to offer you in return." The room fell silent again. Outside, I could hear a neighbor starting their lawnmower, the sound of normal life continuing while my old life crumbled behind me. "Mom," Vivian said quietly, "what if you're wrong about us? What if we really do love you, and you're throwing away your family over a misunderstanding?" I picked up my suitcase and turned to face her one last time. "Vivian, if I'm wrong, then I'm giving up people who would stand by me through anything. But if I'm right, then I'm freeing myself from people who would only stand by me when it serves their interests. And you're willing to take that risk?" I thought about Dr. Blackstone's appointment tomorrow, about the penthouse that would be ready next week, about the business that had grown from a secret side project into something I was genuinely proud of. I thought about the years I'd spent making myself small, hiding my accomplishments, pretending to need help I didn't actually require. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing to take that risk." Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. "Fine. Go ahead and leave. See how you feel when you're going through chemotherapy alone. When you don't have anyone to drive you to appointments, or bring you soup when you're too sick to cook. I'll manage. You'll be miserable and lonely, and you'll come crawling back, begging us to forgive you for being so stubborn and stupid. There it was. The real Vivian, finally showing herself again now that her manipulation had failed. Preston grabbed her arm. Vivian, stop. This isn't helping. But she was beyond controlling herself now. Do you think your money makes you better than us? Do you think you're too good for your own family? You're a selfish, ungrateful woman who deserves to be alone. I walked toward the door, then paused. Vivian, I hope someday you understand the difference between being alone and being free. As I reached for the doorknob, she played her final card. Mom, wait. Her voice was broken, desperate. What about when you die? What about when the cancer wins and you're in the hospital with no one to hold your hand? What about when you need someone to make medical decisions for you, or plan your funeral? Vivian, I'd rather die surrounded by people who are paid to care for me than live surrounded by people who only pretend to. And with that, I walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of the life where I'd spent so many years being less than I was to make other people feel comfortable with who they were. The sound of the front door closing behind me was the most liberating sound I'd ever heard. I drove to the Riverside Gardens Park and sat on a bench overlooking the lake, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline from the confrontation began to fade. For the first time in decades, I was completely alone with my thoughts, no one demanding my attention, no crisis requiring my immediate response. The silence felt both terrifying and magnificent. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Elena, the penthouse inspection is complete. Everything looks perfect. Keys ready for pickup whenever you are. Another buzz. Also, the Meridian financial contract came through. They want to move forward with the full digital transformation project. This could be our biggest deal yet. I stared at the messages, marveling at the surreal juxtaposition. While Vivian had been screaming at me about being selfish and ungrateful, my business was thriving beyond anything I'd ever imagined. While she'd been threatening me with loneliness and death, opportunity was knocking at every door. The irony was staggering. For years, I'd believed that success would somehow make me a worse mother, a more selfish person. I'd kept Thornfield Digital Solutions secret because I was afraid that financial independence would change me, make me less available, less giving, less worthy of love. I'd convinced myself that being needed was the same thing as being loved. What a spectacular misunderstanding that had been. I thought back to the early days after Vivian's father left. She was 12, angry and confused, lashing out at the world and especially at me. I'd absorbed every blow, emotional and sometimes physical, telling myself that she was just hurting, that my job was to be her safe space to express all that pain. When she'd screamed that she hated me for driving Daddy away, I'd apologized and tried harder to be perfect. When she'd thrown things at me during her teenage tantrums, I'd cleaned up the mess and taken her shopping the next day to quote, rebuild our connection. When she'd told me I was embarrassing and stupid in front of her friends, I'd internalized the criticism and worked to be less visible, less present, less myself. I'd learned to read her moods like weather patterns, adjusting my entire existence to accommodate her emotional climate. If she was stressed about school, I became a study aid. If she was upset about boys, I became a relationship counselor. If she was angry about anything, I became a verbal punching bag who absorbed the impact and came back for more. And somehow, in all that adaptation and accommodation, I'd lost track of who I actually was underneath the role of Vivian's mother. The strangest part was that my greatest professional successes had happened during this period of personal diminishment. While I was making myself smaller in my family relationships, I was growing larger in the business world. The confidence I couldn't access at home flowed freely when I was consulting with Fortune 500 executives. The assertiveness I never showed Vivian came naturally when I was negotiating contracts worth millions of dollars. It was as if I'd split myself into two people, Elena the successful CEO, and Elena the grateful mother. The successful Elena made bold decisions, commanded respect, and never tolerated disrespectful treatment from clients. The grateful mother Elena accepted verbal abuse, financial exploitation, and emotional manipulation as normal parts of family life. I'd told myself this split was noble, that keeping my success secret was about preserving authentic relationships. But sitting by the lake, watching ducks glide across the still water, I could finally see the truth. I hadn't been protecting my family from my success. I'd been protecting my success from my family. Some part of me had always known that revealing my wealth would change everything. Not because money corrupts love, but because it would expose whether love had ever actually existed in the first place. I had kept my business secret because I was terrified of discovering that Vivian's affection was conditional on my perceived neediness. And I'd been right. The woman who dismissed my cancer diagnosis as attention-seeking drama had suddenly become passionate about being my caregiver once she'd learned about my bank account. The daughter who'd told me to figure out my own housing situation had immediately started planning our shared future once she'd discovered my business empire. My phone rang, startling me out of my reverie. It was Dr. Blackstone's office. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Sarah from Dr. Blackstone's office. We've had a cancellation this afternoon if you'd like to move your appointment up from Thursday." "That would be perfect," I said, realizing that I was genuinely ready to start treatment. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt strong enough to face what was coming. "Wonderful. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? I looked at my watch. It was 11:30. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I sat quietly for a few more minutes, processing the magnitude of what I'd just done. I'd walked away from my daughter, my son-in-law, and the life I'd built around their needs and expectations. I'd chosen uncertainty over the familiar dysfunction of being taken for granted. The voice that had guided me through this transformation whispered one more time, "Elena, you've spent so many years afraid of being alone that you forgot to notice you were already lonely." That was it exactly. I'd been desperately lonely while surrounded by people who claimed to love me. I'd felt invisible while living in their house, unheard while participating in their conversations, unvalued while contributing to their lives. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Vivian. "Mom, please come back. We can work this out. I love you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Love wasn't something you declared in a text after someone had called your bluff. Love was something you demonstrated through actions, through consistency, through showing up for people when they needed you most. Real love didn't require you to be small, grateful, or convenient. Real love didn't fluctuate based on your financial situation or your ability to provide benefits. Real love didn't disappear when you got sick and reappear when you got wealthy. I'd spent so many years confusing love with need, mistaking dependency for connection, assuming that being useful was the same as being valued. But usefulness was transactional. Love was supposed to be transformational. Another text arrived, this one from Preston. "Elena, Vivian is devastated. Please don't let pride destroy your family." Pride. As if wanting to be treated with basic human dignity was a character flaw. I turned off my phone and put it in my purse. Whatever messages were coming, whatever guilt trips or manipulation attempts or promises of change were being crafted back at the house on Maple Creek Drive, I didn't need to receive them. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to make decisions based on what was best for me, not on what would make other people comfortable or happy or grateful. I was going to fight cancer with the best medical care money could buy, in a beautiful home I'd purchased with my own success, surrounded by people who cared about me as a person, rather than as a resource. I was going to stop hiding my accomplishments and start celebrating them. I was going to stop making myself small and start taking up the space I'd earned. Most importantly, I was going to stop confusing being needed with being loved. As I stood up from the bench and walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about my future. Not because of what I could do for other people, but because of what I could become when I finally stopped limiting myself to accommodate their limitations. The woman driving toward her appointment with Dr. Blackstone wasn't the same woman who'd received a cancer diagnosis 3 days ago. Dr. Blackstone's appointment went better than I'd dared to hope. The treatment plan was aggressive but promising, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt genuinely optimistic about my prognosis. I was walking back to my car, actually smiling, when I spotted a familiar figure leaning against my Honda. My sister Carmen, arms crossed, expression grim. "Elena Maria Rodriguez," she said in the voice that had terrified me since childhood. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I'd been expecting this. Carmen had always been Vivian's biggest defender, the aunt who spoiled her with expensive gifts and told her she was too good for our modest lifestyle. If anyone was going to stage an intervention, it would be Carmen. "Hello to you too, Carmen. How did you know I'd be here?" Vivian called me, crying hysterically. She said you've lost your mind, that you're abandoning your family when you need them most. Carmen pushed off from my car and stepped closer, her designer heels clicking on the asphalt. She said you're having some kind of breakdown and throwing away relationships over money. Is that what she told you? She told me you've been secretly rich this whole time, living in their guest room like some kind of con artist, and now you're punishing them for not reading your mind about your finances. I had to admire Vivian's spin. She'd managed to paint herself as the victim of my deception rather than someone who'd tried to discard her sick mother. "Carmen, did she mention that when I told her about my cancer diagnosis, she accused me of lying for attention and gave me 30 days to find somewhere else to live?" Carmen waved her hand dismissively. "She was in shock, Elena. People say things they don't mean when they're overwhelmed. But you're making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions." Temporary emotions? Look, I get it. You're scared about the cancer, you're feeling vulnerable, and when Vivian reacted badly to your diagnosis, it hurt your feelings. But honey, this is your daughter we're talking about. Your only child. The person who's going to be there for you when everyone else is gone. The confidence in Carmen's voice was staggering. She genuinely believed that Vivian would be there for me, despite all evidence to the contrary. "Carmen, let me ask you something. If you were diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, and Roberto's first response was to tell you to move out and find government assistance because he wanted to start a family without you in the way, would you consider that a temporary emotional reaction?" Carmen's expression faltered slightly. "That's different. Roberto is my husband, not my child. Children are supposed to be able to depend on their parents, not the other way around. Vivian is 26 years old, married, and financially stable. At what point does a child become responsible for showing basic human decency to the parent who raised them? Elena, you're being dramatic. Vivian loves you. She just handles stress poorly, like her father did. You know that about her. Like her father did." The casual way Carmen dismissed cruelty as a personality quirk was exactly the kind of thinking that had enabled Vivian's behavior for years. My phone started ringing. Carmen glanced at the screen and her face lit up. "Oh good, it's your mother. I called her after I talked to Vivian. She wants to speak with you." I stared at the phone, my stomach sinking. My mother, Rosa, was 83 years old and lived in a retirement community about an hour away. If Carmen had gotten to her with Vivian's version of events, this conversation was going to be brutal. "Answer it," Carmen demanded. "She's been worried sick since I told her what's happening." I picked up the call reluctantly. "Hi, Mommy." "Elena, Mija, what is this nonsense Carmen is telling me? You're fighting with Vivian when you need your family most." "Mammy, it's complicated." Complicated? There's nothing She told me that Vivian was upset and said some things she didn't mean. Elena, you raised that girl to be honest and direct. You can't punish her now for having your own personality traits. The logic was dizzying. Somehow, Vivian's cruelty was my fault because I'd raised her to be honest and direct. Mommy honest and direct would be saying, Mom, I'm not emotionally equipped to help you through cancer treatment. What Vivian said was that I was being dramatic and should apply for government assistance. Elena Maria, listen to me. My mother's voice took on the tone that had made me confess to crimes I hadn't committed as a child. I have been on this earth for 83 years, and I have learned that pride will keep you warm at night. Your daughter made a mistake. She's young, she's scared, she doesn't know how to handle big emotions. But she's your blood, and blood forgives. Carmen was nodding along enthusiastically, her phone out and recording our conversation, probably to play back for Vivian later as proof that the whole family was against me. Mommy, what if blood doesn't forgive? What if blood takes advantage and expects unlimited second chances? Then you teach them better by being the example. Elena, I didn't raise you to be selfish. I raised you to be the kind of woman who puts family first, no matter what. Family first. The phrase that had governed every major decision of my adult life. The reason I'd turned down job opportunities, avoided romantic relationships, and hidden my success. Family first had been my religion, and questioning it felt like blasphemy. Besides, my mother continued, Carmen tells me you've been keeping secrets about money. How do you think that makes your daughter feel? She probably thinks you don't trust her. I kept my business private to protect our relationship. And look how well that worked out. Carmen interjected loudly enough for my mother to hear. Elena, you created this whole mess by being secretive and paranoid. Vivian feels betrayed and confused. And instead of helping her understand, you're abandoning her. My mother's voice crackled through the phone. Elena, you come to family dinner this Sunday. You bring Vivian. You sit down like adults and work this out. This foolishness ends now. Mommy, I have cancer. I start chemotherapy next week. I don't have the energy for family drama right now. You don't have the energy to fight cancer alone either. Elena, stop being stubborn and let your family help you. Carmen grabbed the phone from my hand. Tia Rosa, I'll make sure she comes to dinner. I'll pick her up myself if I have to. Good girl, Carmen. Elena, you listen to your sister. She has more sense than you're showing right now. After Carmen hung up, she looked at me with satisfaction. There, now we have a plan. Sunday dinner, family meeting, everyone apologizes and moves forward like adults. Carmen, I'm not apologizing for protecting myself from people who only want me around when I'm useful to them. Elena, you're 52 years old. When are you going to stop playing victim and start acting like a mother? The accusation hit like a slap. Playing victim. As if recognizing abuse was a character flaw rather than a survival skill. I am acting like a mother, Carmen. I'm showing my daughter that there are consequences for treating people badly, even when those people love you. No, you're showing her that love comes with conditions. You're teaching her that family is disposable when it becomes inconvenient. The projection was breathtaking. Carmen was accusing me of the exact behavior Vivian had demonstrated. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Elena, just wanted to confirm, do you still want me to transfer your belongings from store? Not when they're affecting family relationships, they're not. Elena, if you're wealthy enough to own a penthouse, you're wealthy enough to help your family. Do you know that Vivian and Preston are struggling with their mortgage? Do you know they've been putting off having children because they're worried about money? Of course it came back to money. It always came back to money. Carmen, did it ever occur to you that maybe Vivian should solve her own financial problems instead of expecting her mother to bail her out? Did it ever occur to you that maybe that's what family is for? Elena, when Papa died, did Mammy tell you and me to figure out our own lives? No, she supported us until we could stand on our own feet. We were children, Carmen. Vivian is a married adult with a college degree and a career. She's still your daughter. She's still your responsibility. No, she's not. My responsibility was to raise her to be independent and self-sufficient. Mission accomplished. Carmen stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Elena, what has happened to you? The sister I know would give her last dollar to help family. The Elena I know would never choose money over relationships. I'm not choosing money over relationships, Carmen. I'm choosing relationships where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide. And you think Vivian doesn't value you? The girl who calls you her best friend? Who asks for your advice on everything? Who wanted you to live with her so badly that she convinced Preston to give up his man cave? It was fascinating how Carmen could reframe Vivian's control issues as evidence of love, her financial neediness as proof of closeness. Carmen, I have to go. I have a lot to do before my treatment starts. Elena, don't you dare walk away from me. We're not done talking about this. But I was already getting into my car. Through the window, I could see Carmen's mouth moving, her hands gesturing wildly, her face flushed with indignation. But I couldn't hear her anymore. I'd spent my entire life listening to family members tell me what I owed other people, what I should sacrifice, how I should feel. I'd spent decades being lectured about duty and loyalty, and putting family first by people who had never once asked what I needed or wanted for myself. As I drove away, leaving Carmen standing in the parking lot still talking to herself, I realized something profound. The people who were most insistent that I maintain toxic relationships were often the ones who benefited from my willingness to accept poor treatment. Carmen wasn't fighting for my happiness. She was fighting for the status quo that kept everyone comfortable with their roles, including her role as the sister who never had to worry about our mother's emotional needs because Elena would always handle them. The family system needed me to stay in my assigned position, the giver, the forgiver, the one who absorbed everyone else's bad behavior and converted it into understanding and compassion. But I was done being the shock absorber for other people's dysfunction. Let them find someone else to play that role. 3 weeks into my chemotherapy treatment, I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Not the diminished version I'd been playing for years, but the woman I'd always been underneath the role of perpetual caregiver. My penthouse at the Meridian had become a sanctuary of peace and recovery, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and not a single person demanding my emotional labor. I was reading quarterly reports from my business when the building's concierge called up. "Mrs. Rodriguez, there are several people here to see you. They say they're family and it's an emergency." My blood ran cold. I hadn't spoken to Vivian, Preston, or Carmen since the parking lot confrontation, despite their increasingly desperate voicemails and text messages. The fact that they'd found my address and were calling it an emergency meant they were escalating to their final play. "Send them up," I said quietly, setting down my reports and preparing for whatever theatrical production they'd orchestrated. When I opened the door, I was shocked by what I saw. Vivian looked terrible, her hair unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes that made her look years older. Behind her stood Preston, Carmen, and, to my complete surprise, my 83-year-old mother, Rosa. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Dying? What are you talking about? You were fine 3 weeks ago." Carmen stepped forward, her face grave with theatrical sorrow. "Elena, she collapsed 2 days after our conversation. The doctors say her heart is failing. She's been asking for you constantly." I looked at my mother more carefully, noting the way she clutched the walker, the pallor of her skin, the oxygen cannula under her nose that I'd somehow missed in my initial shock. "Mommy, why didn't anyone call me?" "We tried," Vivian said, her voice thick with accusation. We called and texted and left voicemails, but you've been ignoring us. While you've been playing house in your fancy penthouse, your mother has been in the hospital fighting for her life." The guilt hit like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on protecting myself from their manipulation that I'd stopped checking their messages entirely. What if my mother really was dying? What if she'd been trying to reach me and I'd been too stubborn to answer? "The doctors say she has weeks, maybe days," Preston added solemnly. "She insisted on coming here because she was afraid she'd die without seeing you again." My mother reached out with a shaking hand. "Elena, Mija, I know you're angry with the family, but I need you to forgive them. I need to know that when I'm gone, you won't be alone." I felt tears spring to my eyes. Whatever else had happened, whatever games were being played, the thought of losing my mother was unbearable. "Mommy, of course. Let me get you inside, get you comfortable." As I helped her into the penthouse, I could hear the others whispering behind us. The living room fell silent as they took in the luxury of my home. The marble floors, the designer furniture, the view that stretched for miles across the city. "Jesus, Elena," Carmen breathed. "This place must cost more than most people make in a year." I helped my mother to the sofa, arranging pillows behind her back. "Mommy, tell me what the doctors said exactly. What kind of treatment are they recommending?" "The doctors say there's nothing more they can do," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "My heart is too weak for surgery, and the medications aren't working anymore." Vivian sat down on the other side of my mother, taking her hand. "Abuela has been so worried about our family being broken apart. She keeps saying she can't die in peace knowing that her daughter and granddaughter aren't speaking." "It's true," my mother said, looking between Vivian and me with desperate eyes. "Elena, I raised you to value family above everything else. How can I face your Father in heaven knowing that I failed to teach you the most important lesson of all?" The emotional weight was crushing. My mother, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise Carmen and me as a single parent after our father died, was asking me to reconcile with my daughter as her dying wish. Preston spoke up from across the room. "Elena, I know things got heated between us, but surely we can put all that aside now. Your mother needs to see her family united." "Please, Mija," my mother whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll forgive Vivian. Promise me you'll let her take care of you during your cancer treatment. I can't die knowing you're facing this battle alone." Vivian was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I know I said terrible things when I was scared and confused. But Abuela is right. Family is everything. Please don't let pride keep us apart when we should be supporting each other." But something was bothering me. Something about the timing, the staging, the way my mother kept glancing at Vivian for approval before speaking. "Mammy," I said carefully, "what hospital were you in? I'd like to speak with your doctors about your treatment options." "St. Mary's," Carmen answered quickly. "But Elena, the doctors already told us everything. There's nothing more to discuss." "I'd still like to speak with them. What's the name of your cardiologist?" My mother's eyes flickered with something that might have been panic. "Doctor Martinez. But Elena, I'm too tired to think about doctors right now. I just want to spend time with my family." I pulled out my phone. "Let me call St. Mary's and get an update on your condition." "No!" Vivian stood up abruptly. "Mom, can't you see she's exhausted? Why are you interrogating her like she's lying about being sick?" The word choice was telling. Lying about being sick. Just like Vivian had accused me of doing with my cancer diagnosis. Why eyes? I dialed information and asked to be connected to St. Mary's Hospital. "Yes, I'd like to speak with someone about my mother, Rosa Rodriguez. She was supposedly discharged today to visit family." There was a pause, then the voice came back. "Ma'am, I'm not showing any record of a Rosa Rodriguez being admitted in the past month." The room went dead silent. I put the phone on speaker and repeated my request. The same answer came back. No record of any Rosa Rodriguez. My mother's face went ashen, but not with illness, with the pale terror of someone whose lie had just been exposed. "Try a different hospital," Carmen said quickly. "Maybe we got confused about which one," but I was already looking more closely at my mother's medical equipment. The oxygen cannula wasn't connected to anything. The walker was spotless, without a single scuff mark. And now that I was really paying attention, my mother's weakness seemed to come and go depending on who was watching. "Mammy," I said quietly, "stand up." "Elena, she can barely—" Vivian started to protest. "Stand up, Mommy, without the walker." My mother's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's. Then, slowly, she stood up without assistance, her posture straight and strong. "Villy," the silence that followed was deafening. "How long?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm. "How long did you all plan this charade?" "Elena, I don't know what you're talking about," Carmen began. "How long have you been planning to fake my mother's death to manipulate me into forgiving Vivian?" Preston was backing toward the door, his face flushed with embarrassment and guilt. "Elena, maybe we should all just take a step back. You brought my 83-year-old mother here to pretend she was dying. You staged medical equipment, rehearsed symptoms, and used her love for me as a weapon to try to force me back into a relationship with someone who threw me out when I got cancer." Vivian was shaking now, her tears no longer seeming quite so genuine. "Mom, we just wanted to bring the family back together." By lying about death? By manipulating grief and fear and love? By turning my mother into an accomplice in emotional terrorism? My mother finally spoke, her voice small and ashamed. "Elena, Misha, we were just so worried about you being alone." "I'm not alone, Mammy. I'm surrounded by people who care about me, my medical team, my business associates, my neighbors. What I'm not surrounded by anymore is people who think love means the right to lie to me, manipulate me, and use my emotions against me." I walked to the door and opened it. "I want all of you to leave. Now." "Elena, please." Vivian started toward me. "Get out." The words came out with such force that everyone in the room stepped backward. "Get out of my home, get out of my life, and never contact me again. Any of you." "You can't be serious," Carmen said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "Elena, we're your family." Family doesn't fake terminal illnesses to win arguments. Family doesn't use elderly parents as props in manipulation schemes. Family doesn't lie about death to control the living. As they filed out one by one, Vivian turned back at the doorway. "Mom, this isn't over. You can't just cut us off forever. We'll keep trying to reach you. We'll keep fighting for our relationship." "No," I said firmly. "You won't." After they left, I double-locked the door and sank into my chair, my hands shaking with adrenaline and fury. They had weaponized my love for my mother, turned her into a willing participant in psychological warfare, and thought that grief and fear would make me compliant. They had underestimated exactly how much I'd changed. The woman they'd come to manipulate no longer existed. In her place was someone who valued truth over comfort, boundaries over convenience, and self-respect over family approval. And that woman was done playing their games forever. 2 days after the fake death charade, I was reviewing security footage from my building when James called with news that would complete the picture of just how deep Vivian's manipulation had run. "Elena, you need to hear this. I've been digging into some irregularities I found in your old financial records, and what I discovered is going to shock you." I put him on speaker while I continued watching the footage of my family's theatrical performance in my lobby. What kind of irregularities? Remember when you lost your teaching job 3 years ago? The one you said was due to budget cuts? Yes, what about it? I pulled the school district's financial records through my contact in municipal accounting. Elena, there were no budget cuts that year. In fact, they hired 2 new teachers in your department that same semester. I stopped scrolling through the security footage and gave James my full attention. What are you saying? I'm saying you were specifically targeted for termination. So I dug deeper. Elena, do you remember the parent complaints that surfaced against you right before you were fired? My stomach began to turn. The ones about favoritism and unprofessional behavior. They seemed to come out of nowhere. They didn't come from nowhere. They came from 3 families, and Elena, 2 of those families had daughters in the same grade as Vivian. The 3rd complaint came from Preston's mother, Patricia Millbrook. The room seemed to spin around me. Preston's mother filed a complaint against me? A very detailed complaint about inappropriate teacher-student relationships and academic favoritism. She claimed you were using your position to give unfair advantages to certain students while discriminating against others. But I'd never even met Preston's mother at that point. Vivian and Preston had only been dating for a few months. Exactly. Which is why I kept digging. Elena, I found email records showing coordination between these 3 families. They didn't act independently. They collaborated on their complaints to ensure your termination. I sank into my chair, the implications washing over me like ice water. You're telling me that Vivian orchestrated my firing. I'm telling you that Vivian needed you available for her college transition, her wedding planning, and her early marriage. Having you employed full-time would have interfered with her plans for your availability. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. I'd lost my career, my pension, my sense of professional identity, all because my daughter had needed me to be more accessible during her life transitions. James, there's something else I need you to investigate. Can you look into financial records for Preston and Vivian over the past 3 years? I want to know if they're really struggling with their mortgage like Carmen claimed. I'm already on it. Elena, they're not struggling. Their household income is well into 6 figures, they have substantial savings, and their mortgage payments are easily manageable. In fact, they just purchased a vacation property in the Hamptons last month. A vacation property? While claiming they can't afford to have children? Gets better. I found social media posts from Vivian's private accounts, the ones she thinks are hidden from you. She's been bragging to friends about their, quote, investment portfolio and their plans to, quote, build generational wealth. My mind was reeling. I'm already sitting. 3 months ago, Vivian started researching inheritance laws in our state. Specifically, she was looking up information about early inheritance, power of attorney for elderly parents, and estate planning for single mothers with cancer. The air seemed to leave my lungs entirely. She was planning for my death. It gets worse. She also researched life insurance policies, survivorship benefits, and legal guardianship procedures for incapacitated relatives. Elena, she wasn't just planning for your death, she was planning to control your assets if you became too sick to manage them yourself. I thought about the elaborate performance with my mother's fake terminal illness, the insistence that Vivian needed to be my caregiver, the sudden interest in being involved with my business. It hadn't been about love or family responsibility. It had been about positioning herself as my primary beneficiary and caretaker. There's more, James continued. I found communication between Vivian and a private investigator from 6 months ago. She hired someone to research your financial situation because she suspected you had hidden assets. She hired a private investigator to spy on me? The PI's report confirmed the existence of Thornfield Digital Solutions and estimated your net worth at significantly higher than it actually is. Elena, she's been planning this approach for months, waiting for the right moment to either gain access to your money or position herself as your heir. I was quiet for so long that James asked if I was still there. I'm here. I'm just trying to process the fact that my daughter has spent months planning how to exploit my illness and death for financial gain. Elena, there's one more thing. The PI report included detailed information about your cancer risk factors. Apparently, Vivian had been monitoring your medical appointments and knew about your family history of breast cancer. She wasn't surprised by your diagnosis because she'd been expecting it. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Vivian hadn't been shocked by my cancer diagnosis. She'd been prepared for it. She'd known it was likely and had already positioned herself to benefit from it. James, I need you to do something for me. I want you to change all the beneficiaries on my accounts, my insurance policies, everything. Remove Vivian entirely and set up a charitable foundation instead. Already started the paperwork after our conversation yesterday. Elena, I've been concerned about Vivian's behavior patterns for years, but I never had proof of malicious intent until now. Years? You never said anything. You wouldn't have believed me, and honestly, I hoped I was wrong. But Elena, some of the financial emergencies Vivian came to you with over the years, they weren't real. The semester abroad program that supposedly cost $15,000? She never enrolled. The medical emergency that required $10,000 for treatment? No medical records exist. The car accident that needed $8,000 for repairs? The insurance covered everything. My entire relationship with my daughter was being rewritten before my eyes. Every crisis, every emergency, every tearful plea for financial help had been carefully orchestrated lies designed to extract money from me while positioning her as the devoted daughter who would someday inherit everything. How long have you known about this? I started getting suspicious 2 years ago when the financial requests became more frequent and the amounts larger. But Elena, you seemed so happy to help her, so proud to be needed. I didn't want to interfere with what looked like a loving family relationship. Even though you suspected she was defrauding me, I suspected she was exaggerating her needs and taking advantage of your generosity. I didn't realize until recently that she was actually planning to inherit your estate by positioning herself as your indispensable caregiver. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below, thinking about all the choices I'd made based on lies, all the opportunities I'd passed up to be available for manufactured crises, all the years I'd spent believing my daughter's love was genuine when it had actually been a long-term investment strategy. James, I want you to compile all of this evidence into a comprehensive report. Everything. The school district investigation, the financial records, the search history, the PI report, all of it. I was quiet for a moment, expecting to feel devastated. Instead, what I felt was a profound sense of relief. The doubt, the guilt, the nagging feeling that maybe I'd been too harsh or too suspicious, all of it evaporated in the face of concrete evidence that my instincts had been completely correct. You know what, James? I'm not devastated. I'm vindicated. For years I felt like something was wrong but couldn't put my finger on what it was. I kept making excuses for behavior that felt off. Kept giving second chances to someone who was playing a long con. And now? Now I know that every boundary I set was justified, every instinct I had was right, and every step I took to protect myself was necessary. Vivian isn't a daughter who made mistakes under stress. She's someone who spent years systematically manipulating and defrauding her own mother while planning to profit from her illness and death. I turned away from the window, feeling lighter than I had in years. James, finish that beneficiary paperwork as quickly as possible, and draft a letter to be included with my legal documents explaining exactly why Vivian was removed from any inheritance consideration. What do you want the letter to say? I smiled, thinking about the woman who had once hidden her success to preserve what she thought was a loving relationship. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who valued truth over comfort, evidence over sentiment, and self-protection over family obligation. Tell them that some people spend their whole lives waiting for their parents to die so they can inherit wealth. But the smartest parents figure out how to die broke and happy, surrounded by people who love them for who they are, rather than what they can provide. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuinely excited about my future. Not because of what I could give other people, but because of what I could become when I finally stopped limiting myself to accommodate their limitations. The trap had been revealed, but I was no longer the one caught in it. 6 months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of my penthouse, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. My chemotherapy had ended 2 weeks ago with results that exceeded every expectation: complete remission, clean scans, and a prognosis that had my oncologist using words like remarkable and unprecedented. But the real transformation hadn't happened in my body. It had happened in my understanding of what it meant to live authentically. The woman who had once hidden her success to preserve fake relationships was gone, replaced by someone who had learned the difference between being loved and being needed, between family and people who happen to share your DNA, between loyalty and enabling destructive behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Blackstone. "Elena, your 6-month scans are perfect. You've officially graduated from patient to survivor. Congratulations on your courage throughout this journey." Courage. The word would have meant something different to me 6 months ago. Back then, I thought courage meant enduring abuse in silence, accepting poor treatment with grace, and sacrificing myself to keep others comfortable. Now I understood that real courage meant refusing to accept less than you deserved, even when that refusal disappointed people who claimed to love you. James arrived for our weekly business meeting, carrying coffee and wearing the satisfied expression he'd worn ever since Thornfield Digital Solutions had been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as one of the year's most innovative companies. "Elena, I have some news that I think will amuse you," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Remember the restraining order paperwork we filed after Vivian's last contact attempt? The one where she tried to convince my doorman that I was having a mental breakdown and needed family intervention? That's the one. Well, it seems your former family has been busy. Carmen's been telling everyone who will listen that you're suffering from, quote, chemotherapy-induced dementia, and that's why you've cut contact with people who love you." I laughed, genuinely amused rather than hurt. Of course she has. How else could they explain why someone would choose independence over dysfunction? It gets better. Vivian's been posting on social media about toxic parents who abandon their children over money and positioning herself as the victim of financial abuse. I read a few lines of the blog post, marveling at Vivian's ability to rewrite history. According to her narrative, I was a cold, calculating woman who had used money as a weapon to manipulate her emotions and control her life choices. She painted herself as a devoted daughter who had tried everything to maintain a relationship with a mother who cared more about power than love. "You know what's fascinating about this?" I said, handing the tablet back to James. "She's describing exactly what she tried to do to me, but projecting it onto me instead. Classic psychological projection. She's taking her own behavior patterns and attributing them to you. The irony is that she's probably convinced herself that her version is true. She's rewritten our entire relationship in her mind to make herself the victim, rather than the perpetrator." My phone rang, and I was surprised to see my mother's number. I'd had no contact with any of them since the fake death incident, and I'd assumed they'd given up trying to reach me. "Hello, Mommy." "Elena, Mija, please don't hang up." Her voice was smaller than I remembered, lacking the commanding tone she'd used during our last conversation. "I need to talk to you." "I'm listening. Carmen and Vivian, they told me things about what happened that weren't true. I thought you were being cruel and stubborn, but I've been learning more about the situation, and Mija, I think I was wrong." This was unexpected. "What changed your mind?" "I've been watching Vivian's behavior since you cut contact. Elena, she's not the girl I thought I knew. She's been asking me for money constantly, claiming she can't afford basic expenses. But then I see her posting pictures from expensive restaurants and vacations." I could hear the confusion and pain in my mother's voice as her worldview shifted. "And Carmen," she continued, She's been pushing me to change my will, to leave everything to Vivian instead of splitting it between you and her. She keeps saying you don't deserve inheritance because you abandoned the family. What do you think about that, Mammy? I think a daughter who truly abandoned her family wouldn't have been sending anonymous payments to cover my assisted living expenses for the past 6 months. I'd wondered if she'd figure out where those payments were coming from. I'd arranged for them to be processed through a third-party service to ensure her care continued without creating an opportunity for family manipulation. You didn't abandon us, Elena. We abandoned you when you needed us most, and then we tried to manipulate you into accepting that abandonment as love. The apology was more than I'd expected and more meaningful than I'd imagined it would be. Mammy, I want you to know that I don't hate any of you, but I can't have relationships with people who see me as a resource rather than a person. I understand, Misha, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because of your business success, but because you had the strength to walk away from people who were hurting you, even when those people were family. After we hung up, I felt a profound sense of completion. My mother's acknowledgement didn't erase the years of dysfunction, but it validated my decision to prioritize my well-being over family expectations. James was watching me with curiosity. Good call? Surprisingly, yes. My mother finally sees the situation clearly. And how does that make you feel? I considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, that phone call would have felt like vindication I desperately needed. Today, it felt like a nice bonus rather than a sentence. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Another business opportunity, another chance to expand Thornfield Digital Solutions into new markets. My calendar was full of meetings with potential clients, consultations with other entrepreneurs, and appointments with people who valued my expertise and treated me with professional respect. Elena, James said, I have to ask, do you ever regret walking away? Do you ever miss the family dynamics, even the dysfunctional ones? I looked around my penthouse, at the evidence of the life I'd built when I stopped making myself small to accommodate other people's limitations. The awards on my walls, the contracts on my desk, the view of a city where I was respected and valued for my actual contributions, rather than my willingness to be useful. James, I spent so many years confusing chaos with connection, drama with intimacy, and being needed with being loved. I thought that relationships required constant sacrifice and that boundaries were selfish. And now? Now I understand that real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself. Real love celebrates your success rather than resenting it. Real love shows up when you're sick, not when you're wealthy. I walked back to the window, looking out at the city that had become my home in ways that went far beyond geography. I don't miss the family dynamics, James. What I grieved was the fantasy that those relationships could become something they were never designed to be. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived in the penthouse across the hall. Elena, I'm making too much soup again. Would you like some? Also, my grandson is visiting from medical school and would love to hear about your business journey if you have time. This was what real community looked like. People who offered support without expecting anything in return, who celebrated each other's successes, who showed up consistently rather than only during crises. You know what I've learned, James? There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I spent years surrounded by people who made me feel desperately lonely. Now I live by myself and feel genuinely connected to the world around me. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting my living room in warm light, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace with my choices. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the deep satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your values. I'd survived cancer, built a business empire, and learned to distinguish between people who loved me and people who needed me to be smaller than I was. I discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, even when that someone is family. The woman who had once hidden her success to preserve fake relationships was gone forever. In her place was someone who understood that authenticity was worth more than approval. that boundaries were acts of self-love rather than selfishness, and that some relationships were meant to end so that better ones could begin. I picked up my phone and responded to Mrs. Chen. "I'd love some soup, and I'd be honored to talk with your grandson. Thank you for thinking of me." Then I turned back to my laptop and continued building the life I'd always been meant to live, one where I took up exactly as much space as I deserved, loved people who loved me back, and never again apologized for being successful, healthy, and free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.